The grassland was silent, the sort of silence that follows a protracted, intense downpour. Cole was out inspecting the boots and fence line. He heard a faint wail floating on the breeze as he sank into the soft dirt. Heart thumping, he stopped and listened. Once more, there heard a voice pleading for assistance, feeble and shaking. Pushing through the long grass, he followed the sound until he came across her. She was hunched under a cottonwood tree, her face pallid with agony, her clothes ripped and dirty. As he got closer, she raised her head, her eyes wide and frantic. With little more than a breath, she muttered, "Please help me." Clay knelt next to her and gently brushed the hair away from her face. "Now you're safe," he whispered quietly. She flinched and put a hand to her side, saying, "Tell me where it hurts." "My hip and my leg." "It hurts down there too, but I fell." Her eyes were hurting, yet her cheeks were flushed with shame. Cole's anxiety increased. He had previously witnessed such injuries, horse-related falls and field mishaps. He was aware of how easily a minor injury could worsen. "Let me take a look," he stated in a steady, quiet voice. As he cautiously raised the hem of her dress in an attempt to find the cause of her discomfort, she nodded and bit her lip. On her thigh he discovered a deep bruise. The skin was red and inflamed. However, he froze as he carefully drew aside the cloth to look for other injuries. Beneath the blood and sludge was a deep, raw, jagged wound that was already starting to grow. Cole gasped for air. He was aware of the potential dangers because he had previously seen wounds like this. He forced his voice to remain steady as he said, "We need to get you cleaned up." As he cautiously raised the hem of her dress in an attempt to find the cause of her discomfort, she nodded and bit her lip. On her thigh he discovered a deep bruise. The skin was red and inflamed. However, he froze as he carefully drew aside the cloth to look for other injuries. Beneath the blood and sludge was a deep, raw, jagged wound that was already starting to grow. Cole gasped for air. He was aware of the potential dangers because he had previously seen wounds like this. He forced his voice to remain steady as he said, "We need to get you cleaned up. This cut needs to be washed and bandaged or it'll get infected." Tears were streaming down her face as she nodded. Whispering, "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't mean to be a burden." With a firm yet gentle tone, Cole shook his head. "You don't cause trouble. You need assistance because you're hurt. That is the only thing that counts." He pulled her into his arms and draped his coat over her shoulders. Being cautious not to bump into her damaged leg, her body shook in agony and terror as she held onto him. Every step was deliberate and slow as they made their way back to the ranch. In a quiet, calming voice, Cole told her of the prairie's recovery from a storm and the wildflowers that will blossom in the spring. He sensed her slight relaxation when the ranch house appeared. Within, after placing her on the sofa, he got clean clothes and warm water. He worked swiftly, using soft yet firm hands to wash the blood and filth from her wounds. Her breath caught every time he touched the wound as she gazed at him with wide, appreciative eyes. "It's deep, but I think you'll be all right," he remarked, putting a fresh bandage over the incision. "You'll need to rest, and I'll keep an eye on it for infection." Her face was filled with relief as she nodded. "Cole, thank you. I was terrified. I assumed I would spend the entire night outside." His eyes were warm as he grinned. "You are now secure. I'll look after you." Cole sat next to her, watching as the storm clouds dissipated and the prairie fell into a quiet silence as she closed her eyes, fatigue taking control. As the night became darker, Cole came to the realization that sometimes the most selfless deed was just being there, pulling back the darkness, facing what had to be faced, and providing solace when it was most needed. Slowly the night went by, with the only sounds in the ranch home being the crackle of the fire and the woman's gentle, irregular breathing. Cole sat close by, keeping watch, and reliving the moment he had discovered her in his thoughts. How nearly she had been swept away by the storm. How much suffering she had attempted to conceal. Every hour, he checked her bandage to make sure the swelling hadn't gotten worse and the bleeding had stopped. She stirred, her eyelids flickering open just before daybreak. She appeared momentarily bewildered. She then felt a wave of comfort upon seeing Cole. "You stayed," she said in a horror whisper. "Thank you." Grinning, he helped her sit up and poured her a cup of water. Naturally, I stayed. Someone was needed by you. Her hands were still shaking when she took a sip of the water. Hannah is my name, she whispered quietly. I was attempting to travel over the valley to my aunt's house. My horse threw me after being frightened of a snake. I must have crawled for hours before I found that tree. Cole listened patiently while nodding. You're fortunate to have reached this point. Particularly after a storm, the grassland can be harsh. Hannah's cheeks were coloring as she gazed down. I felt very ashamed. I wanted no one to see what was down there. I reasoned that if I waited, the agony would subside. Cole spoke softly and shook his head. Needing assistance is not a sign of weakness. Eventually, we all do. After assisting her in eating some breakfast, soft bread and warm soup, he examined her wound once more. The wound was clean and the edema had somewhat decreased. He said, "You're healing," with a tone of relief. "However, you'll have to take a few days off from that leg. I'll let your aunt know so she won't be concerned." Hannah gave a nod, her eyes gleaming with appreciation. "Cole, you're so nice. I'm not sure how to express my gratitude." With a slight smile on his lips, he shrugged. "You're not required to. We watch out for one another out here." Hannah slept as the day went on, dozing off and then waking up. Cole never stopped checking on her and making sure she was comfortable when occupied with tasks. In the afternoon, he gave her a book from his modest bookcase, and she read aloud as he worked nearby. Cole found himself anticipating the sound of her steady yet gentle voice. By dusk, the pain had subsided enough for Hannah to sit up and enjoy the sunset from the window. The prairie glowed in the last of the light, and the sky was streaked with rose and gold. She mumbled, "It's beautiful. I never thought I'd see another sunset." Cole sat next to her, providing a solid and comforting presence. "Hannah, you're safe now. You are free to remain for however long you require." Hope flickered in her eyes as she gazed at him. "That would be nice. Although I don't want to be a burden, I also don't want to be alone myself." He gently touched her hand as he reached for it. "You're not by yourself. No more." For the first time in days, Hannah slept easily that night as the stars above the prairie blinked alive. A calm descended upon Cole as he sat by the fire. He came to discover that sometimes the most difficult wounds to repair were those that were concealed beneath the surface, rather than the ones that were visible. The fears, the shame, the loneliness. Cole also made a silent vow as the moon climbed high, to provide Hannah with a sense of belonging, aid in her recovery, and serve as a reminder that even the most severe wounds can be confronted and conquered. The days that followed were warm and full of modest gestures of goodwill. Hannah always had all she needed because to Cole's constant attention to the ranch, warm meals, fresh water, a book to read, or just a peaceful moment by the window to observe the prairie come to life. Under Cole's watchful eye, Hannah's strength gradually returned, the agony in her leg subsided, and the wound healed neatly as she gained strength. Hannah started lending a hand around the house. She peeled potatoes, swept the floors, and even attempted baking bread, giggling when her first attempt turned out uneven. With her laughter filling the halls, Cole noticed that he was grinning more and that the ranch felt less deserted. A wagon showed up on the horizon one afternoon. Cole identified the driver as Mrs. Wilkins, Hannah's aunt, who had a worried expression on her face. She hurried inside and embraced Hannah in a passionate hug. "I was so afraid I'd lost you," she said, tears in her eyes. Hannah grinned and spoke steadily. "I'm all right, Annie. Cole located me. He looked after me." With appreciation in her eyes, Mrs. Wilkins turned to face Cole. "Mr. Cole, thank you. I'm not sure how to pay you back." Cole smiled softly as he shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. I was simply happy to assist." The small house was lively with discussion as Anna's aunt stayed for dinner. Mrs. Wilkins grasped Hannah's hand as the sun began to drop, illuminating the sky with shades of lavender and gold. "Now, sweetheart, you can accompany me home." Hannah paused and looked at Cole before saying, "You're safe. If it's okay with you, I'd like to remain a little longer. Until I recover completely, I want to assist Cole with the ranch." Mrs. Wilkins grinned, her eyes full of comprehension. "Naturally, kid. Although you're welcome home at any time, you're old enough to make your own decisions." The ensuing weeks flew by, filled with fun and work. Hannah's leg recovered. and she gained self-assurance every day. Working side by side, she and Cole tended to the garden, fixed fences, and told stories by the fire. Their relationship grew stronger, based on kindness, trust, and the silent bravery required to bear suffering and go on. Hannah said quietly one evening as they observed the stars above the plains blinking awake, "Cole, I was really terrified, not only of the suffering, but also of being noticed and having someone understand how much I needed assistance and how upset I was. However, you never made me feel guilty. You simply gave a damn." Cole gently spoke as he held her hand. "Hannah, we all need assistance from time to time. That is not a source of shame. Having someone to rely on is what counts. Someone who will stick by you during difficult times." Her eyes gleamed as she grinned. "Cole, I want to remain. Here I wish to establish a life with you." With his response evident in his eyes, he grabbed her hand and said, "If you'll have me, I can't ask for anything more." The ranch prospered as the seasons changed. Together, Hannah and Cole created a life that was full of laughter, hard work, and the silent satisfaction that comes from knowing that you've both found your place. For more stories, please like the video and subscribe to my channel if you're liking this one. Hope and the prospect of fresh starts supplanted the agony of the past. Cole discovered her under the cottonwood tree on the day's anniversary. Along the fence line, Anna planted wild flowers, which contrasted vividly with the verdant plains. With love and thanks gleaming in her eyes, she put Cole's hand in hers. As the broad and promising prairie opened up in front of them, they realized that even the most profound wounds could be healed, and that sometimes the best gift was just being there, to pull back the darkness, to console and to face the future with one another.